His ribs jutted out like sharp stones beneath torn fur. The German shepherd lay curled beside a rusted chain, too weak to whimper, too broken to care. For weeks, his barks had echoed through the remote edge of Wilson County. Then, one night, they stopped. Locals thought the dog had died. Winter winds howled through the trees surrounding the abandoned shack, where the animal's eyes, sunken and hollow, no longer flinched at sound. He had forgotten what warmth felt like, what kindness smelled like. Days blurred into freezing nights, the silence around him growing thicker, heavier, until it felt like even hope had left. But then something changed. A pair of headlights cut through the fog one early morning. Tires crunched on the gravel. Doors opened. Voices, soft, uncertain, drifted into the frigid air. One belonged to a woman. Another, older, more measured, belonged to a retired veterinarian. The shepherd didn't lift his head. Miranda Jenkins, from the local animal rescue, stepped cautiously into the yard. She gasped when her flashlight found him. Skin stretched tightly over bones, patches of fur missing, and eyes that stared past her as if she weren't real. "He's still breathing," whispered the vet, kneeling beside him. "Barely." They moved fast. A blanket, quiet lift. No sudden moves. No promises. Just motion, gentle, determined motion. As if this fragile creature might shatter at the wrong touch. As the van door closed, the dog didn't resist. Didn't struggle. He had surrendered to whatever fate had planned. He didn't know he had just taken the first step toward the miracle he never expected. Behind them, the old chain lay in the frost, coiled like a snake that had finally lost its grip. And though the shepherd couldn't lift his head, somewhere deep inside his fading body, a flicker stirred. It wasn't strength. It wasn't faith. But it was something. And outside the van window, in the bleak morning light, something small, something barely there, began to gleam. Snow crunched under Miranda's boots as she stepped through the half-buried gate of the forgotten property. The air was bitter, the kind that clung to the skin and whispered stories of things left behind. A slanted mailbox hung open like a gaping mouth, and an icy wind rattled the rusted porch swing. She pulled her scarf tighter, eyes scanning the skeletal trees around her, their branches clawing at the gray sky. The shack before her leaned to one side, its windows black with grime, but faint footprints in the snow told her someone or something had moved recently. Somewhere in that lifeless silence, Miranda felt something watching. Inside the van, Dr. Harlan waited, the heater humming low, casting a dim orange glow across the dashboard. He glanced toward the shack, then back at the clipboard resting on his lap. "Are you sure this is the place?" he had asked earlier. Miranda hadn't answered. She had seen the post on the rescue group's forum, a blurry photo of a skeletal dog, tied to something, alone. She hadn't slept since. Now, standing before the place, her heart thudded against her ribs like it wanted to run without her. She reached the steps and paused. The door hung crookedly on its hinges, a faded sign still clinging to the siding, "Beware of dog," but there was no bark, no movement, only the distant hiss of wind curling through broken slats. Her fingers trembled as they hovered over the handle, unsure whether they were ready for what lay beyond it. A soft jingle echoed faintly, then stopped. She blinked. Was that a collar? A patch of fur peeked from behind the sagging porch rail. Sunlight broke through the clouds just then, casting a gentle glimmer on a tarnished tag. Miranda stepped forward slowly, pulse quickening. The dog didn't move, didn't growl, just stared as if through her. But in that look, something stirred. An ember, barely alive. She knelt, careful and slow, and whispered, "I'm not here to hurt you." The wind stilled. The swing creaked once more. Then silence. Miranda Hayes wasn't a stranger to broken things. At 32, she'd spent more years patching up wounds, both her own and others, than she cared to count. A former trauma nurse turned rural animal rescuer, she had traded hospital hallways for muddy trails and howling nights. After losing her younger brother in a roadside accident 3 years ago, the world had dimmed for her. She'd moved away from the city, away from everything familiar, and poured herself into saving what could still be saved. Her heart was tired, but her hands were steady, and that was enough for now. She never planned on keeping any of the dogs. Her property was meant to be a halfway home. Clean up, heal, rehome. But some dogs had other ideas. The first was Bruno, a one-eyed Labrador with a bark bigger than his bite and a fondness for stealing socks. He'd followed her around like a shadow ever since she pulled him from a drainage ditch during a spring flood. Then came Millie, an arthritic beagle with a sweet tooth and a snore like thunder. But what struck Miranda the most wasn't how broken these dogs were. It was how quickly they gave love once they felt safe. This new shepherd, though he was different. She had named him Ash, after the way his fur clung to his skin like the remnants of something once whole, now burned. His ribs were visible even after 2 weeks of food and rest. He barely moved. When she first brought him home, he didn't resist, didn't flinch, just stared at the world through hollow eyes, his tail limp. Bruno tried to nudge him into play, but Ash stayed curled near the wood stove, barely blinking. He didn't growl, didn't bark, just existed, quiet, watching. Miranda often sat across from him in silence, sipping tea, wondering who had let a dog like this waste away. She couldn't touch him yet. He shrank from every hand, but she spoke to him every day about nothing and everything. Sometimes he tilted his head slightly, and once he almost wagged his tail. His eyes held something, pain, yes, but also a deep, unfathomable intelligence. Secrets, stories, trauma too old for a young dog. One night, as the firelight danced across the cabin walls, Ash stood up for the first time and took one step toward her. Just one. But to Miranda, it was everything. She set down her tea slowly, heart aching with hope. He was still in there, whoever he had been. And maybe, just maybe, he was ready to return. Ash had been making slow progress. Miranda had learned to celebrate the smallest victories. A lifted ear, a tentative sniff, the way he no longer trembled when she placed his bowl nearby. Each step was a silent miracle. But one cold morning, the kind that painted the windows with frost and made the old wood cabin creak in its joints, Ash was gone. The back door was cracked open, just barely. No footprints in the snow. No paw prints either. Just absence, terrifying, gaping absence. Miranda's breath hitched as she called his name, over and over, the sound echoing into the forest like a desperate question. Bruno barked anxiously, pacing the floor. Millie whimpered near the stove. It wasn't like Ash to bolt. He was timid, unsure of the world. He never even approached the threshold before, not without encouragement. Something wasn't right. Miranda didn't waste time. She bundled herself into layers, grabbed a flashlight and a whistle, and headed straight into the woods behind her house. The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon, and the trees cast long, blue shadows across the snow. Every few yards, she stopped to listen. Nothing but the wind sighing through pines. The stillness felt unnatural. She found the first clue near the edge of the ravine. A tuft of black and tan fur caught in a thorn bush, high up, as if something had lifted him or if he'd leapt in panic. Then a set of half-melted prints. She followed them blindly, adrenaline mixing with dread in her veins. He couldn't survive out here. Not like this. Not in his condition. Hours passed. The sky turned to ash. Miranda's feet were numb, and her hands trembled as she clutched the whistle. She blew into it sharp and shrill. No answer. Then, just as she was about to give up for the moment and turn back, she heard a bark. Short, frantic, from deeper in the ravine. Her heart jumped. She scrambled down the slope, slipping on icy leaves, grabbing at roots and branches. And then she saw it. Ash, crouched beneath a fallen tree, ears back, tail rigid. His body shielded something, or someone. Miranda slid closer, breath catching in her throat as she saw the small figure beneath the logs. A boy, maybe 9 or 10, barely conscious, pale, scratched and shivering. His coat was torn, and blood had dried at his hairline. Ash stood over him like a sentinel, teeth bared, growling low. Not at Miranda, but at the forest beyond. She knelt slowly, whispering Ash's name. "It's okay," she said, voice trembling. "Let me help him." Ash didn't move. Not at first. Then, with a whine, he stepped back, allowing her to pull the boy out carefully. His skin was cold. Too cold. "Where did you come from?" she whispered, holding the child to her chest, scanning for a path back. Ash barked again, this time urgent. Then he turned and ran, stopping a few feet ahead and looking back. He wanted her to follow. Carrying the boy, slipping and stumbling through the brush, Miranda followed Ash as he wove a strange, winding path. He stopped often to check she was behind him. Each turn brought them closer to the trail leading back to her cabin. It was like he knew the way. But how? Back inside, Miranda wrapped the boy in blankets and called the sheriff and medics. Her radio barely had signal, but the call went through. Within an hour, red and blue lights flashed outside. EMTs took the boy. He was hypothermic but alive. A hiker had gone missing 2 days ago with his young son. The father had been found, injured, but searching frantically for the boy. No one knew how the child ended up that deep into the ravine alone. But Miranda did. The dog wouldn't leave the boy's side in the hours before help came. He watched every move, eyes sharp, protective. Bruno and Millie sensed the change in him too. This wasn't the same dog they'd lived with for weeks. Ash stood tall now, alert, alive. After the boy was taken, Ash curled by the fire again, breathing heavily. Miranda sat beside him, her hand hovering before resting gently on his back. He didn't flinch this time. He leaned into her touch, even if only slightly. She felt his warmth through her palm, and her heart ached with gratitude. Whatever scars he carried, Ash had risked himself to save a child. Something inside him had shifted, but questions remained. That night, Miranda couldn't sleep. The boy's name was Dylan, and he'd already spoken to the medics. He said, "The big dog found me and stayed all night." He said, "The dog scared the shadow away." Miranda couldn't shake those words. What shadow? Over the next few days, she kept an eye on Ash. He was more alert, more active, but still wary. One evening, she decided to take him for a walk into the woods where she'd found him. He hesitated but followed her, step by step, ears twitching at every sound. They reached the ravine again. She scanned the area, trying to piece together how Ash had known about the boy, how he'd gotten out. She checked the thorn bush again, and saw something she hadn't noticed before. A collar, nearly buried in the snow. It wasn't Ash's. Old, torn, faded leather with a brass tag barely readable. Max. She picked it up, heart pounding. Ash was staring at it, motionless. His whole body seemed to freeze, as if memory had gripped him. Then he barked once loud. Not scared, defiant. Later that night, Miranda searched local rescue databases, shelters, and old reports. Took hours, but she found it 3 counties over. A German shepherd named Max had been reported stolen 2 years ago. The story mentioned a suspected illegal fighting ring. Authorities had raided the place, but many dogs had disappeared. Max was never found. She stared at the screen, her breath shallow. The photo matched perfectly. Ash was Max, and he had survived something worse than just abandonment. Miranda closed the laptop slowly, glancing over at him. He lay by the fire again, tail gently wagging in his sleep. For the first time, he looked at peace. But the shadow that Dylan spoke of, it wasn't just metaphor. Because in the weeks that followed, Miranda noticed something troubling. Strange cars parked on the road, men asking questions at the local store about a shepherd matching a description. Bruno barked more than usual, and one night, Ash growled at the door until dawn. Someone was looking for him, someone who wasn't done. Miranda locked the door that night and slid the old rifle under her bed. She wasn't just an animal rescuer anymore. She was a protector, Ash's protector. The days that followed were a quiet storm, still on the surface, but humming underneath. Ash no longer cowered when Miranda reached for him. He began sleeping closer to the fire, even allowing Bruno to nudge into his side. Every time Miranda looked at him, she saw more than just a dog. She saw the flicker of something ancient, loyal, and scarred. But the peace was fragile. Each moment of warmth carried a strange weight, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then came the first sign, tracks in the snow, just past the treeline, where the pines thinned and the ravine began to rise. They weren't fresh, maybe a few hours old, but they weren't animal tracks either. Boots, heavy ones, not from a hiker, not from anyone in town as far as Miranda knew. The prince stopped halfway through a clearing and vanished, as though someone had stood and stared at the cabin for a long time. Watching, she didn't tell anyone. Not the sheriff, not the neighbors, not even herself, really. She brushed it off as nothing, until Bruno growled that night without reason. No animals, no wind, just silence broken by a low, steady growl that didn't stop until dawn. Ash didn't growl. He just stared at the door, unblinking. The next morning, Miranda found something nailed to the gate at the edge of her property. A scrap of cloth, darkened with mud, with a crude shape drawn on it. 2 slashes forming an X. She recognized the mark. It matched the description of a symbol found during that raid on the fighting ring 2 years ago. It had been branded onto crates. A signature. They were looking for him. She pulled Ash closer, wrapping her arms around him. He didn't resist. He laid his head against her chest, and for a moment it was just them. Safe. But the wind howled louder that night, and Miranda couldn't tell if the creaking was the old cabin or footsteps on the porch. Still, she didn't leave. She couldn't. This was his home now. Their home. A few days later, Miranda ventured back into the woods, needing answers. She retraced the route Ash had taken to lead her to Dylan. The trail felt different now, colder, darker. The trees seemed to lean in closer, shadows deeper than before. She found another set of prints, lighter this time. Not boots, paw prints, Ash's. But something was wrong. They were spaced out, uneven, like he had been running from something, or to something. Further along, she found broken branches and disturbed earth, signs of a struggle. Then, nestled at the base of a tree, a torn piece of fabric. Familiar. It was from Ash's old collar, the one he wore when she first found him. But it had been missing for weeks. She thought it had fallen off. Now, here it was, stained and half-buried, as if someone had placed it there. A message. A twig snapped behind her. She spun, flashlight shaking in her hand, but there was nothing. Only wind, trees, the normal sounds of forest life, but muted, as if even nature had gone quiet. Her heart pounded in her ears. Then, just as she was about to turn back, she heard it. A bark. Faint. Echoing. Familiar. Ash? She called out. Silence. Then again the bark. Closer this time. Urgent. She ran, following the sound, stumbling through brush and over roots. The sound pulled her forward, deeper than she'd ever dared go. Her breath came in ragged gasps, mist clouding around her face. Finally, she broke into a clearing and stopped cold. Ash stood at the far edge, rigid, facing a figure in the shadows. A man. Tall, heavy coat, hat pulled low. Miranda couldn't see his face, but she saw his stance. Unmoving, too calm. Ash growled low, a sound Miranda had never heard from him. It was primal, defiant. The man didn't flinch. He simply turned and disappeared into the trees without a word. Miranda rushed to Ash, falling to her knees beside him. He licked her hand, then looked back into the trees. He was protecting her. They walked home together in silence, the wind hissing through the branches like a whisper. That night, she placed fresh logs in the fireplace, double-locked every door and window, and slept with the lights on. Ash didn't sleep. He stayed by the front door, eyes alert, ears twitching. 2 nights later, the power went out. No storm, no warning, just blackness. Miranda lit candles and pulled her flashlight from the drawer. Bruno paced restlessly. Millie barked at the window. Ash stood still as stone, his body tense. Then they heard it. The sound of an engine, low, slow, rolling up the long dirt road toward the cabin. Headlights briefly cut through the trees, then went dark before reaching the house. Miranda's breath froze in her chest. She grabbed the rifle from under her bed and crept toward the door, Ash right behind her. She opened it slowly, inch by inch. Nothing. Then a sound, metal scraping wood. Near the back of the house. She spun around and ran through the kitchen, flashlight sweeping wildly. Outside by the shed stood the man. Closer this time. He raised one hand, palm open, then pointed to Ash through the glass. Miranda didn't wait. She raised the rifle. "Leave!" she shouted through the door. "He's not yours anymore." Ash barked once. Loud, piercing. The man didn't move, but behind him another shape emerged. Then another. 2 more figures. Miranda's heart pounded like a drum in her ears. Suddenly, headlights, bright and blinding. A vehicle sped up the path behind them. The men scattered, retreating into the woods like ghosts. It was Sheriff Hanley. "I got your call," he said, stepping out of the car. "We've been watching those guys. You're not alone anymore." Relief crashed into Miranda so hard she nearly dropped the rifle. She turned to Ash, who was still growling low, but calmer now. He stood tall, proud even. In the hours that followed, officers combed the woods. They found tire tracks, cigarette butts, old blankets near the ravine, evidence of a camp. They were being watched for days, maybe longer, but it was over. For now, the sheriff installed a trail cam system around the property. Miranda reinforced the windows. Life returned slowly to something close to normal. Ash no longer growled at the door. He played with Bruno in the yard. He let Millie tug his ears. And one sunny morning, as snow melted into the soft soil of early spring, Ash ran. Not away, but toward Miranda, ears perked, eyes bright. He barked joyfully, circled her feet, then lay on his back, belly up. The final wall had fallen. He had chosen her. And Miranda? She knelt beside him, buried her face in his thick fur, and whispered, "You're home now, forever." But in her heart, she knew the story wasn't quite over, because somewhere in the woods, something still watched. But this time it would find a different Ash waiting. Not a victim, a guardian. The final snowfall came late that spring, blanketing the cabin in a soft, eerie quiet. Miranda stood at the window, fingers curled tight around her mug, watching Ash pace the porch. He hadn't barked in days, but his ears never stopped twitching. Something was still out there. The air felt heavier, like the woods were bracing themselves. Then came the call. Sheriff Hanley's voice was terse. "We found something." 2 men arrested outside Greenville. Same mark as before. They were looking for a dog. A specific dog. "Your dog." Miranda felt her stomach twist. "Why?" "They ran a pit ring out in Kansas. Shut down 2 years ago. A black shepherd turned on his handler during a fight, protected a smaller dog, nearly tore a man's arm off. They've been trying to recover him ever since. Said he was their moneymaker." Sounds like Ash to me. Miranda stared at Ash through the glass. He sat now, watching the tree lean, still as a statue. She lowered the phone. It all made sense now. The scars, the silence, the nightmares. He'd never run away, he'd escaped. He wasn't broken. He was brave. That night, it happened. The snow muffled everything, but not enough to hide the crunch of footsteps. 3 shadows moved in from the woods, cloaked in white, like ghosts. Miranda was ready. She'd seen the signs. Ash had never left her side all day. Bruno barked once, then fell silent, sensing the storm about to break. The first bang came at the back door. Miranda grabbed the rifle, her fingers trembling but sure. Ash stood beside her. No growl, no bark. Just alert, eyes locked on the sound. The second bang was louder, closer. Miranda whispered, "Stay." Ash didn't move. The kitchen window shattered. Miranda spun, aimed, and fired a warning shot through the open frame. The figure dropped from view. Then came a scream from outside. She rushed to the porch and saw chaos. One of the intruders was on the ground, clutching his leg. Ash stood over him, teeth bared, fur bristling, eyes glowing like embers. Blood darkened the snow. Another man ran from the woods, screaming for Ash to back off. but it was too late. Ash lunged, tackling him in a blur of motion. Miranda fired into the air again. Enough! Ash backed off, panting, chest heaving. The two intruders scrambled away, slipping in the snow, disappearing into the trees. Sirens wailed in the distance. Hanley had heard the gunshots. Ash limped to her side, tail low, blood streaked across his snout. Not his own. Miranda dropped to her knees, arms open. "Come here." He hesitated, then stepped into her arms, pressing his weight against her, letting out a long, tired breath. She held him as the flashing lights crested the hill. The sheriff and his team swept the woods, catching the third man within the hour. The others didn't get far. One had a broken leg. The other was bitten so badly he needed surgery. Hanley took statements, photos, reports, but all Miranda cared about was Ash. He lay by the fire that night, his head on her lap, body warm and heavy. Bruno curled up nearby. Millie snored softly. Miranda watched the flames dance and whispered, "You saved us." Ash's eyes fluttered open. For the first time, he licked her hand gently and let out a contented sigh. Days turned to weeks. The media got hold of the story. "Rescue dog turns hero," they called it. But Miranda didn't care for headlines. She declined every interview. The cabin became quiet again. Safe. Ash healed quickly, faster than she expected. The limp faded. The light in his eyes didn't. They hiked the woods together now. No more fear. Just long walks, rustling trees, and the occasional burst of joyful barking. Ash would chase rabbits, not to catch them, just for the thrill. Bruno followed close behind. Millie, still too small to keep up, barked her protests from the cabin steps. One evening, as twilight painted the snow in soft blue and silver, Miranda tossed a stick into the clearing. Ash chased it down and brought it back, tail wagging furiously. "You think you can outrun me now?" she teased. Ash barked once, playful, bright. She knelt down, rubbing his ears. "You're not just a good boy. You're mine." He leaned into her chest, heart beating steady and strong. That night, Miranda placed a new tag on his collar. Polished metal engraved carefully. Ash, brave, loved, home. She hung his old collar above the mantel, beside a photo of them both. A reminder of where he came from, a mark of what he became. And as the fire crackled and the stars blinked overhead, Ash curled beside her, finally at peace. No more running, no more fear, just family, forever. Spring arrived gently that year, melting the last of the snow from the cabin's roof. Wildflowers bloomed along the edge of the woods, and birdsong returned to the quiet mornings. Miranda stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching Ash and Bruno chase each other through the tall grass. Millie barked from a distance, her tiny legs trying to keep up. There was laughter in her chest again. Effortless. True. Ash had changed everything. He'd come into her life as a shadow, wounded and wary, with a past no one could fully understand. But he had fought his way back. Not just from fear or pain, but into love. And Miranda had changed too. She no longer kept her heart behind walls. He had broken them gently, with every silent nudge and every glance that asked only for trust. She leaned against the railing, eyes following Ash as he paused near the treeline. He looked back at her, ears perked, tail swaying slowly, as if asking, "Are we safe now?" And she nodded. They were more than safe, they were whole. Inside, the fireplace had a new photo on the mantel. Ash, curled up with Millie and Bruno, his eyes calm, mouth in a soft, peaceful smile. Beneath it was a carved piece of wood with one word: family. Sometimes Miranda still thought about how close she came to never meeting him, how easily fate could have missed its turn. But instead, it led Ash to her doorstep, broken, lost, but not beyond saving. And in saving him, she had unknowingly saved herself. She stepped off the porch and whistled. Ash came running, joyful and free, brushing against her side as she laughed. The others followed, a blur of fur and joy and life. They had weathered darkness, yes, but what remained wasn't fear. It was light. It was love. And as they disappeared into the golden meadow together, one truth remained as clear as the mountain air. They'd found each other. And that was enough. What if Miranda had never opened her door that stormy morning? What if Ash's quiet whimper had gone unheard, lost to the wind? It's a question that lingers because sometimes it only takes one choice to change everything. Would you have followed his paw prints into the woods? Would you have risked it all for a second chance at love? If the story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. Have you ever rescued a dog or been rescued by one yourself? We'd love to hear your story, paw prints. And if Ash's journey reminded you of the power of hope, loyalty, and healing, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up. It helps more kind-hearted people discover stories like his. Subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales of resilience, love, and the unbreakable bond between dogs and humans. We've got more emotional journeys coming your way. Some will make you cry, others will lift you up, and all of them will remind you why dogs truly are our best friends. And hey, share this video with someone who needs a little hope today, because sometimes a single story can be the blessing someone didn't know they needed. Ash found his way home. Maybe someone else will too because of you. Dogface Yellow Heart. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the best stories begin with a bark at your door.